Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday. It is May 22nd, and I'm back in the office, back in the suit and tie. But let's do part 4 of kind of my story and how DHA came to be. So part 4, we've come through kind of my 8 years of what I called the career years as I went through the companies MITRE and DEC and Momentum and then KPMG, Pete Marwick. And that brought me through a series of a couple of Godwinks. When the universe gets behind you, I've talked about Dr. Spillman sending me to that interview with MITRE, sitting next to Jim Stanfill on the plane back from Boston to Seattle, kind of getting picked by one of my clients at DEC to become their Director of Information Systems, and then really needing to move Anne-Marie back to Maryland. That really that could at the time seem like a huge disruption, but I believe it was one of the key things that got me here today. So let's see. As always, I've got some notes, and in fact, I tape them up now. I've learned that if I tape them up underneath the camera, I can look at them without always turning away like this. A couple of you guys commented about my glasses too, so it's kind of funny. If I use my glasses, you can see the blue screens that I have, and then up here I have 6 screens, and 3 up top I have just white Google screens up, and that kind of acts like my camera lights. So if you see them flash off, I just hit the mouse to bring them back. But if I take my glasses off, I can't read my notes. So you just got to deal with some blue in the glasses. So let's talk about it. So we've come through my life now. It's September of 1994. I'm 30 years old, and essentially the next Godwink occurs in my life. I was working that project where I was 1 week in DC and 1 week in Boulder, Colorado. And the weeks I was in DC, I actually sat down at Fort Belvoir. It's in Northern Virginia. It's just maybe 15 miles south of Washington, DC. And so the client liked us to be sitting on site. So that's where I was. And one day I was sitting there, and a man walked up to me, Colonel Chuck Mudd, in the Army, and said, "Hey, would you be interested in supporting an active Army project, much like what you did with the Reserve? And would you be interested in maybe starting your own company, hang out your own shingle?" And I was like, hell yes. So I went out and started working. I actually had 2 partners that wanted to come with me. And, some of my older videos talk about my experience and my belief in partners. I don't believe in them, and I don't think you should use them as the short story. But over the first couple of months of starting the company, I had to jettison both partners. One due to some extreme IRS issues, and one to lying to me about a purchase order so that we would juice in a buddy of his into the company. And so both had to be removed, and I moved on and started DHA pretty much on my own. The Godwink, though, was the colonel saying, "Look, I can get you a purchase order. If you come over, I can get you a 6-month purchase order right now. We can get rolling." And I was excited about it. I said, absolutely. So I went to my company, and this is where you just have to, I preach about plans and all that, but sometimes you have to take a leap. I just don't advise it, because if the leap doesn't work, you can go splat on the other side. So I took the leap, though. I made a decision for me in my life. I owned a small home. I had a wife, brand new wife, no kids, no real debt. So I took the leap. And so when I went to my company and asked them, hey, I said, I have this opportunity. I want to start my own company. It's something I've always wanted to do, but I don't want to screw you. I don't want to screw the client. So why don't I would propose something like this, 2 weeks full-time, 2 weeks half-time, 2 weeks quarter-time, 2 weeks on call. And over the course of 2 months, we'll transition. It was a pretty large account. It had, I think, 30, 40 people working for me at the time. And so I wanted to do it right. And what they said back to me was, how about be gone by 2 o'clock? And so I drove home that day with no purchase order yet and no job. And that was a pretty stressful drive home. I was trying to think, how am I going to say this to Anne-Marie? I get home, I walk in my house, and back then, so again, this is September 1994. Back then, people were still used fax machines, and in fact, they used thermal fax machines, the kind where the paper would curl up, and there'd be a knife that would cut across it, and you get this like a little tube. Every page would be a little tube rolled up on the floor. And when I got in there, when I got home that night, from essentially being fired for saying I wanted to leave, I walked in my house, and underneath my fax machine was a pile of little tubes, and it was the purchase order the colonel had said he could do for me. And so it had 6 months worth of hours, which is, you know, about 1,000 hours, 1,100 hours at my hourly rate, and I could go to work. So I actually got home, took that thing, got up in the morning, and went to work as DHA. So I drove home as KPMG X and went to work the next morning as DHA employee number 1. So that's how it started. The colonel said he'd made several calls, and they pointed back to me as someone who could get things done as kind of a program manager. And so I just embarked upon this kind of about 5 months of just digging in and getting their program up, structured, as funded as best we could, the funding requests. I mean, the program started to come together. And, you know, my 2 partners were gone, DHA was formed. And as I got towards the end of the 5th month, I had 1 month to go. And so I'm starting to ask, hey guys, what's next? What do you want to do? And we were beginning to talk about, you know, another 6 months or another year. And in my business, that's kind of how this works. You live kind of month to month, year to year on purchase orders. So I wasn't really nervous, but I said, I'm coming up on it. What do you want to do? And the kind of unbelievable thing happened. I mean, that week that we started talking about, hey, we're a month out, what do you want to do? Another guy walked up to my desk. Now, I'm in a different part of Fort Belvoir now, because I'm now with the active Army. And in fact, we were working in Army barracks, World War II Army barracks. And in 1994, 1995, they were approaching their 50th year of being constructed, and they were going to be deemed historical structures. These crappy 2-story Army barracks. I mean, literally where the soldiers slept while they trained. And so they started burning them down. I mean, the Army decided they were just going to burn them to the ground rather than have them be declared historic structures or historic landmarks. And so the Arlington County and Fairfax County fire departments would come in maybe once a week and for training burn one to the ground. The only problem was we were still in them. And so literally the building next to you, maybe 20 yards away, was being burned down while you're working in it. So that was an interesting 5 months. Anyway, totally done. I'm gonna have some stories on this one, so this might take several videos to get through the startup, because I have some great stories. And watching a building burn down that was so hot the siding on your building buckled and started to melt, you know, definitely not OSHA approved, right? Anyway, the next Godwink, the big one, another guy came to me, another guy named Chuck Figgins. He said, hey, the FBI would like to talk to you. Would you come up to headquarters? And so I said, holy crap, the FBI. I mean, you know, so I think the next morning I went up to the FBI headquarters, the J. Edgar Hoover building. We call it JEH. It's on 10th in Pennsylvania. It's 1 block from this office. And I went there and I interviewed, and they said, we have a bit of a national emergency. Can you come on and help us? And we need somebody who can get something done and just drag it over the finish line. We need the functional capability. I said, look guys, I have 3 weeks left with the Army. I'll come here the next day. And I went home that night, and the FBI had me a purchase order. I couldn't believe it. And so I finished my 6 months with the Army. Their program was up and running. They were in a pretty good spot. I told them I had another assignment, and I went to the FBI. And really from that, that first week of April 1995 through today, we've never gapped. We may actually be one of the longest serving support contractors in FBI history. I don't know, I've never checked. Don't even know how I would do that. But anyway, my first assignment, I literally got to the J. Hoover building that Monday morning. And my assignment was to get on an airplane and fly to LA. So I went back home, left my wife a note, said, went to LA, call you from there. and flew to LA and spent a couple weeks in LA fixing a big technical problem that has to do with when you leave a fingerprint at a crime scene and we don't know who it belongs to. It's called a latent fingerprint. And we were losing the ability to scan those in and search for the identity of that, do we know who that person might be. And it was due to camera technology, and it was very old, and they were breaking, and they wanted to move to scanner technology, but the contractor they had hired just couldn't get it done. And so I flew out to LA and basically stayed there for 3 or 4 weeks. And within 6 weeks, we had a working prototype. And we flew that working prototype. We got authorization to bring it into the Hoover building. And we started to run test runs on identity. And at the same time, it's a horrible Godwink, but the Murrah building was blown up in Oklahoma City. We called it Oak Bomb. And one of the pieces of evidence they asked us to do a test run on was a Ryder truck rental receipt. And we were able to identify Timothy McVeigh. And so that kind of made us famous. I mean, and once that was done, the system was then certified and brought in for court evidence procedures and for evidence handling and tracking procedures. And the FBI then sent me on a series of pretty fun assignments. And maybe at some point I'll tell you other ones like that. But that's kind of how, you know, I got a reputation for excellence, for making things happen. And then I really was able to execute that when I started my own company, for the Army to get a program set up and for the FBI to get a technical product in the door, up and actually solving cases. And so they sent me through a series of those for a while. And one of them was to help modernize the 10-print fingerprint matchers. The program back in the 90s was called IAFIS. It stands for something that's too long for this video. We're already at 12 minutes. So 1994, September we start. April of 1995, we get into the FBI. 1995, 96, 97, we're through a series of, hey, can you do this? Can you help me with that? Can you solve this? You know, I became, I know some of the directors personally, and we just got a great reputation for a company and a person who could just get things done no matter what you ask them to do. And so that's 5 years, though. That's the next thing I want to tell you is, from September 1994 till May of 1999, it was me, one guy, 5 years. I know for some of you, 5 years is like literally a lifetime. But it took me 8 years to get ready. It took me 5 years to hire my first employee. And in May of 1999, I did that. The FBI finally came to me and said, can't you find another person like you? And so we went out and found him, Fred, and we hired him in May 1999. There goes the screens. And so we had our first employee. And the thing I'll warn you about, when you hire your first employee, you have to have salary, payroll, benefits, 401k, matching. You have to make it an attractive company for this person to come to you, or the great ones aren't going to want to come to you. And so in May 1999, we did that. We brought him in, employee number 2, and spent the next few years, really from May of 1999 to 2007, okay? We hired about 1 a year. And as we approached summer of 2007, we were about 18 FTE. That's just that slow growth. Hey, can you find me an engineer like you guys? Can you find me a finance guy like you? Can you find me a program specialist like you? And just over the course of years, added one. Just grew our way really from 99 to 07. So that's another 8 years to get to 18 FTE. I know these timelines aren't attractive to you. I get it. 8 years to get ready, 5 years as a one-man show, another 8 years to grow to 18. And then we get into July of 2007. And in July of 2007, our next Godwink occurred. I was called by the contracting officer within the FBI who was responsible for putting together a $1 billion procurement, and the FBI wanted to know if DHA would bid on it. Please, we want to get to you directly and not go through other companies to get to you. We need your company on this contract. And so we agreed. We said we would bid it. We were placed on the bidders list. It was released in November of 2007. It was due 42 days later on January 8th, 2008. So for 42 days, we worked literally 18, 19 hours a day for 42 days straight. The only day we took off was Christmas Day, and we put in on January 8th what we call PMSS, our prime proposal for PMSS to the FBI, and it took about 2 months, but we were awarded one of 9 contracts on that vehicle on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 2008. Huge inflection point for this company. But kind of what I want to show you is if you're out there, available, listening, prepared, nimble, responsive, these Godwinks are presented to us. We all have them. I am not special. And so from Colonel Mudd approaching me to Chuck Figgins approaching me to being able to fix that contract to finding some key solutions to cases to being called to say, please bid on this, to getting that award. Those are all Godwinks to me, but we are prepared enough to address them, smart enough to recognize them, and nimble enough to make it happen. And that's become the story of DHA throughout the years. So now we've won this thing. It's March of 2008. We've won this vehicle, but there's no money with it. You have to win task orders, but we started to win task orders. So we were one of 9. The other 8 were the bigs. I mean, the companies you always heard of, CSC, got a SAIC, Booz Allen, I mean, and then DHA. In fact, they were laughing at us at the award conference. There was like 8 awards and who? And but then we started winning, and we won task order after task order. And really, by the end of the contract, several years later, we as one company of 9 had actually taken about 25 or 30% of that vehicle. And so we were on the map, and that's really the growth period now. The part that started the company from that genesis, that one-man show, to what you're hearing today or seeing today, it really began, that inflection point was March of 2008 when we won PMSS. Guys, we're at 17 minutes. I guess I'll tell you another story real quick and then we'll get off of here. One of the other cool projects they asked us to do, once we got the latent fingerprint system kind of up and running, and then we helped get IAFIS, the 10-print system. Now that had hundreds of people on it. We were just part of it. But as IAFIS became successful, they asked me to move to what they call CODIS. And CODIS is the ability to match DNA from crime scenes and kind of like fingerprints, right? But they had fallen behind. It was an antiquated system, and it was using older algorithms and older hardware, and they needed someone to come in and help modernize that program, and we were asked to go do that. So that was another success for us, and the ability to understand how DNA matchers work and fingerprint matchers work and latent fingerprints work has really been an honor. It's pretty cool to understand how these things work for real. Guys, that's really it. We're at 18 minutes. It's too long, so we'll keep going with DHA. We'll do a part 5 that's all DHA, and then maybe a part 6 will be what my plans are moving forward. Let me know if this is too long, if it's too boring. I'll shorten up the next part, and we'll get through the DHA story quicker. Guys, have a great Tuesday, and hopefully we'll talk again tomorrow. Bye, everybody.